before we introduce the rest of the team, I'd like to bring Michael Barker out again, please.
No.
Thank you so much for bringing this film to us, and thank you for all of the insight that you gave into Jonathan and to the film beforehand. That was one of the best introductions. Thank you for what you said about Roger. Thank you for what you said about me. Thank you for being you. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, this was not my idea. This was Chaz's idea to bring this film. So.
And I have to introduce, I forgot some of the raw parts of this movie. I love this movie so much, and I see something different in it every time. And right now I'm in a very emotional state. And I'm so happy that you're going to have a conversation with three people who I consider three of the best people in this world. I mean that they're good people, and they're all brilliant. I think we're going to have a good conversation. And then on the screen, we're going to bring in Lena Horne's granddaughter, the screenwriter, Jenny Lumet, and we can find out how much of this is autobiographical, if at all. Anyway, I'd like to introduce Stephen Apcon, who started the Jacob Burns Film Center, one of the most important centers for independent film in the world, actually. But what most of you remember Steve as, he got the first Ebert Humanitarian Award for disturbing the peace. And Nell Minow, who has been here many times, she's started Movie Mom. She's a film critic at RogerEbert.com. She's an attorney, and she's also really one of my favorite people. She's just a really good person. Nell Minow.
Okay, I just wanted to mention two people that I didn't mention before. The cinematographer of this film is a guy named Declan Quinn, and he's a real genius. Tom and I met him when we did this movie with Louis Malle called Vanya on 42nd Street, which was a movie that cost $750,000. It took place all interiors, and Louis was a genius. He said, I want to pick a cinematographer that does exteriors. So we met Declan Quinn, and he did that movie, and you know, Julianne Moore's red hair was like a desert in a Western, you know? And I think Jonathan became enamored of his talent. He could do big movies, he could do little movies. And I think he was Jonathan's favorite DP. And a big key to the success of this film is how he used these mobile cameras to go throughout this house in so many different ways. And then the other person I want to mention is the editor is a guy named Tim Squires. When we did Crouching Tiger, he was Ang Lee's editor. And Jonathan Demme was so impressed with this young man, lives in New Jersey, who at that time he only did movies with Ang Lee, and he also did Gosford Park. So I think his editing is pretty remarkable because a lot was filmed with those little cameras. Anyway, I want to mention those two people. Sure.
Wow, this is a true statement. Every single time I load the dishwasher in my house, I think about this movie. I really love this movie. I think in a way, Chaz allowing me to be a part of the discussion on this movie is making up to me for having to do that crazy Japanese surreal movie last year. So I thank you very much. I want to talk about, this may be my favorite use of music in a movie, so I want to talk about that. I know you all noticed that every note that we heard was a note that the characters heard. So talk to me a little bit about that decision and about how that influences the film.
Well, one thing that, for everybody who knew Jonathan, he lived through music. I mean, it was amazing. I always thought that we could make $1 million by auctioning off his iPod because he had the most incredible taste in music, and he was always acquiring new things, and he had such a great love of it. And the first people you see in the film playing music is his son Brooklyn, playing the guitar, and Brooklyn's high school classmate, Barry Eastman Jr. And I was talking to Brooklyn yesterday, and he said, you know, this is my high school band, and his father was their biggest fan. So he puts them together with Robert Hitchcock. He had made a film, Storefront Hitchcock, and that's the way that he rolled.
It was interesting to me, Michael, that you mentioned the script had a different name when it first came to you. And one of the things that I've always thought was just so perfect about this movie was the title, because it's really Kim's story. But you know, it's not called Kim Goes Home or Kim Gets Out of Rehab. It's called Rachel Getting Married. And so tell me a little bit about the title, both from a marketing aspect, I guess, and from a creative
I was actually
aspect.
involved with that decision. We knew that Dancing with Shiva would never work, because if you found out what Dancing with Shiva means, I think it's dancing with heroin or something. And I think we looked at 500 titles. It was unbelievable. We couldn't find anything. The first cut of the film that we saw, the rehearsal dinner ran 2.5 more times than it does now, and the wedding ran 2.5 more times. It was just like he hadn't cut it down yet. But when the one gentleman does a toast, he looks at Rachel and says, Rachel getting married. I said, Jonathan, if it's Rachel, I thought it was Rachel and a comma getting married. But he changed it to Rachel getting married. I think it's great that it's called Rachel Getting Married, because it really is about the wedding. And I also, again, was astounded at how great Rosemary DeWitt was. She should have been nominated for the Oscar, no question, to play that sister and to bring all that out of it.
I think there's something also that's so beautiful about that title, because this is very hard for me to talk right now after this. This is an incredibly emotional experience. I love this film, and I love Jonathan. He was an enormous part of my life. And I know
Say what you said to me out there in backstage about what this movie was. Yes.
I don't think that, I've never seen a movie that is the culmination of a filmmaker's life put on screen. And he may not have known it because it was a few years before he got sick. But this is not only his life brought together, but it's his vision for what was possible. Everything that on the screen was in the script, except for a few things, like Michael said in the introduction. The toasts, for instance, the only people who had scripted toasts were Emma and Kim. Everybody else spoke from their heart, and that's why it took so long. I mean, these were, there was 45 minutes of toasts each time, and I'm sure it all made it into the first cut. But going back to the title that Michael was talking about, yes, it was Kim's movie, but what was beautiful is if there's an arc in the movie, it was Kim's realization that it was about her sister Rachel getting married. And that, in many ways, was such a beautiful moment, such a redemptive moment of her humanity in seeing that.
You also mentioned that Jonathan was insistent on using Anne Hathaway, but most of us thought of Anne Hathaway at that point as Princess Diaries and sort of a princess.
All right, I'm going to answer that too. Basically, when we read the script, Jonathan had a conversation with Meryl Streep, who had done Devil Wears Prada with Anne Hathaway. And Meryl Streep said she could do it and she'd be great. And Jonathan listens to Meryl Streep. And Anne Hathaway read it, and she loved it, and she really wanted to do it. I actually wanted to get Jenny in on this part of the conversation. So we had a reading, and the reading was unbelievable. First of all, before this movie, she had made light movies or movies for young girls and so forth, except for Devil Wears Prada. And so it was a first really serious movie. She showed up at that table reading. She knew every line in the script, and that performance at that table was as good as that. And Tom and I were like, holy cow, she's a major actress. And watching this again 11 years later, that's a major performance. Anyway, in that room was Sidney Lumet, who read for part of it, and Paul Thomas Anderson read for the father, and all of Jonathan's friends were at that first reading, and the idea was to convince Anne Hathaway and Michael and Tom to do the movie. So when the reading was over, of course, we all did it.
Wow.
We should get Jenny.
Yes, let's do
Okay.
that.
Can we open the curtain?
We'll find out.
While we're doing
Find
that,
out.
you should also know that when I said this was Jonathan's vision of the world and all the people coming together, so the person who officiated the wedding was Cousin Bobby.
Yep.
Right.
If you remember the documentary that Jonathan did on his cousin, who was a priest in New Jersey,
Okay.
and Jonathan's celebration of his life was actually at the church in Harlem that Cousin Bobby ran for many years.
I noticed a lot of people this time I never
Oh, what's
noticed
that?
before. I noticed in a couple of background shots, there's the boy that Anne Hathaway eventually married who was in there. And Roger Corman had a camera in one shot.
He did.
I saw him in the credits, and I was like, what? Roger Corman?
He actually had a line that ended up getting cut. He hands Anne Hathaway a business card and says, if you ever need any legal advice. But it didn't make it into the final cut. Jonathan in 2005, this is who he was. So in 2005, the hurricane in New Orleans happened. And everybody's trying to figure out what to do. And he got on a plane with a camera.
Yeah.
And he wanted to tell stories. And there's a film that I produced ultimately in 2011 for him. So it was after this film, 3 years after this film. And the first scene of the film, it's a film called I'm Carolyn Parker. And it's about this woman who's the first person to return to her home in the lower Ninth Ward after Katrina. And the film starts with him walking down the street. And she comes out of her house and he says, hi, I'm Jonathan. And she takes him into her house. So there were 5 characters, 5 families that he was following in New Orleans. Pastor Mel was doing a rehab work, and he is the one who's leading the AA meetings. Jonathan always hoped that after Carolyn Parker, the next film would be Pastor Mel. And when I talked to Brooklyn yesterday, Brooklyn was down in New Orleans, now 14 years later, filming Pastor Mel to finish that film.
Wow.
The grandmother, Sidney's grandmother in the film, Harrice Harrison, and Donald Harrison Jr., was another one of the families in New Orleans. So there's so many of these. Every time you watch it, you pick out Inbo, who's in it, was his researcher on Man from Plains. I mean, it was all these people that he collected and loved.
And the actor in the beauty parlor had an incredible scene with Denzel Washington in Philadelphia. He brought all those actors that had the small parts that he liked and brought them into the
I
movie.
noticed that the woman singing at the end of the wedding was the woman that Michelle Pfeiffer goes to work for in Married to the Mob, and who's almost going to get deported. Yeah.
And the guy in the Western outfit is in every one of Jonathan's films.
Yeah.
And the violinist, who's an amazing Palestinian musician, Zafar Tawil. Zafar, he did the score for Man from Plains, and he also did the score for I'm Carolyn Parker, literally just playing to the final cut.
Amazing.
And then the other person that I would mention that is in the film at the end, in the wedding, when it pans through the audience, is Jonathan's wife, Joanne. And it really was so moving to have her in there as well.
Yeah, I wish she was here.
I also got a kick out of seeing Bucky in the first scene, for those of you Avengers fans. Sebastian Stan, I had completely forgotten that he was in the movie, and he was wonderful in that very small part.
Oh, yeah.
He's a terrific actor.
Also, Ben Platt is in it. long before Evan Hansen,
Is that right?
because Jonathan knew him.
Wow. All right, are we going to get Jenny?
Les, can we get Jenny on?
Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
Let's see if we can get her on the phone.
While we do that.
I'm on the...
Oh, all right.
Hi, Jenny, can you hear us?
Hi, Michael Barker. Yes, I can hear you.
So, Jenny, we just...
Yeah?
The film was
Wait, hold
incredible.
on. Wait, stop. Hi, Champagne. Thanks for coming.
So, Jenny, we have been celebrating Jonathan like crazy before and after the screening. The screening was incredible. I told everyone a bit of your life story before the film began. But now we are in celebrating Jenny Lumet mode. So
Yeah.
I asked Nate
Wait,
Cohn.
can I tell my kids that you guys are in this mode? Because they never believe me when I say I'm cool. And I keep having to show them pictures of me being cool, but they still don't buy it.
What's that?
I said, if you're celebrating Jenny Lumet, I'd love for my kids to hear it because they think I'm really uncool.
She wants her kids to hear it.
Oh, okay.
Jenny, hi, this is Nell Meno. This will all be on YouTube, so they'll get a chance to see
Oh,
it.
great.
Anyway, to start, to know you, Jenny, is to also know your family. And I was reminiscing about the first reading where your father was present and biting off the pencil to make sure it was going well at that table reading. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I do remember that.
And Paul
Yeah.
Thomas Anderson played the father. And I
Yeah.
also, you know, not only, Sidney was such a wonderful guy. I actually think Sidney Lumet was one of the inspirations for Jonathan wanting to do the film. He loved the screenplay so much, but he really liked your connection to Sidney. And I think he thought about Sidney's direction of drama, intimate drama, when he made this film. And
Tell me why you're saying this. This is interesting.
And then of course your grandmother is Lena Horne. So what we're going to do is I asked Nate to provide first a clip from Stormy Weather with Lena Horne, and then a clip from Dog Day Afternoon with Sidney Lumet, and then we're going to talk to Jenny. She is the legacy of that family. So can we start to show it?
I just want to say, when people ask me to recommend a book about movies, I always recommend Sidney Lumet's book. I highly, highly recommend it.
That's a great book.
It is a great book. Thank you for saying.
Directed by Vincent Minnelli, right?
Okay. So Jenny, here's my question. First of all,
sir.
after Lena Horne and after Sidney Lumet came Jenny Lumet, by the way, who I forgot to mention, won the New York Film Critics Prize for Best Screenplay for the movie you just saw. And so, Jenny, everyone's asking how autobiographical this movie is. Can you talk about the family you've come from, and also to what extent the film is autobiographical?
I'm happy to. If you guys are okay with it, I'd just like to talk about what just happened on this end of the phone, because I could hear, for about 2 seconds, I could hear both those clips. Now, watching my dad's movies is essentially like watching my dad when, and both of those people, they're gone. But I got to hear those voices, and I'm hearing them through the phone, and they had this echo, and they had this delay. And Michael, it was like listening to my family being in another place. I cannot explain to you what this experience was just like. I've never heard without seeing, and that was really powerful. So thank you for that. I mean, I would have loved to have been there, but I would have not had this particular experience. I'm very grateful. Wait, what did you just ask me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've been just going through that, feeling like we've been with Jonathan, Stephen Epcon, and me from the very first frame of the movie to the end, like he's here with us.
Like, yeah. He's such a, and I know I'm happy to talk about the movie, but if there was ever a time for a parent now, and so he is so missed. He's so missed. So I'm happy to talk about my grandma or my dad or that movie. Is there any particular order? Or maybe it might be better to ask a question and I can answer? What do you think is the best way?
Well, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Your understanding of the dynamics of addiction and of families of addicts is so sensitive and insightful. So I would like to know about what research or experience you had that really informed that.
Oh, well, you know, I'm not an addict, but I have addicts in my family. And I think that when you have addicts in your family, you, of course, develop your own stuff. I mean, my feeling is there should be no stigma in talking about this kind of stuff. So I listened, and I remembered. And when you have an addict in your family that is completely normal, everything that you saw on the screen is completely normal. It's completely status quo. It doesn't seem like, oh, how strange, or oh, how, just kind of, oh, look, it's Tuesday, and everybody's trying to jump off the roof or set something on fire. Oh, okay, that was before lunch. So it's not, it's, as long as one is willing, I guess, to be honest about it, it's not that hard. It didn't occur to me that I was writing about a family with an addict in it. It occurred, I just was writing about a family.
One of the things that's extraordinary and hopeful and beautiful in the film is the portrayal of such extensive ethnic diversity. And I know that's something you have in your family, but why was it important to include that in the film?
You know, it's funny, because when Michael Barker took everybody to Venice, thank you, Michael, that was really fun. When Michael Barker took
Still
everybody
blame
to
me
Venice,
for that, I know.
You know, it was great. European press started asking me if I was making some kind of hopeful declaration about Obama, and I was like, can I curse? Because I tend to curse like a sailor sometimes. Is that allowed?
Yes.
Okay, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because that's what the world looks like, and that's what my world looks like. The only thing that was important to me was that the character had to have, the parents both had to be of the same race, because I didn't want anybody to say, oh, her parents, she comes from a mixed marriage and therefore that is the source of her addiction problems, because that's a really easy thing for people to pick up on. But again, it's this is what a lot of families look like. And I was happy to see that it was merely it was just merely a wedding. And I also figure if you're a white girl and you're marrying a black guy, like you probably talked about it at some point before the wedding, or vice versa. It's not like she woke up the morning of her wedding and said, "Oh my God, you're black, freaky." They probably would have. If they had anything to say about it, they probably would have worked it out already.
Jenny,
Yes, sir.
Nell asked about the dishwashing scene. I think you should talk about that.
Okay, it's a story. So here's the story, you guys. So it was and this was a kind of a fancy story, but you just got to go with it. So it was in the house in East Hampton, Long Island, where I spent the summer of my life, and I was indeed the only pair of Afro puffs in East Hampton, Long Island. I just want to let everybody know that. So over for dinner, it was Bob Fosse had come over for dinner, and Bob Fosse is an extraordinarily elegant man. And my dad, God bless him, looks like a cantaloupe. So Bob Fosse was in black cashmere pants and a black cashmere sweater, and he had a black cashmere sweater thrown over his shoulders. And he was smoking this cigarette, and the smoke from his cigarette looked like Bob Fosse's smoke. It was extraordinary. And so my dad's in the kitchen wearing a sweatpants and a sweatshirt, which had like vinaigrette stains on his tummy, because he always got food all over himself. And he's putting the dishes in the dishwasher, and Bob Fosse is next to him, and I'm on a stool in the kitchen. I remember I had a tab. I was drinking a tab, and Bob Fosse takes a big inhale and says, "You know, Sydney, if you put the salad bowls in the top rack, you'll get about 10% more dishes in the dishwasher." And then my dad looked up and said, "Go fuck yourself, Bob." And then the two of them spent the rest of the evening unloading and loading the dishwasher. And I was like, "Don't you guys have anything better to do because you're, titans and whatnot?" And no, it was the most important thing ever. And Dad was really motivated because Bob Fosse was taller to be the dishwasher victor in this situation.
I remember there was one screening where someone said to Jonathan, "You got to get rid of the dishwashing scene." And Jonathan said to me, "I am never talking to that person again."
So it was merely observational. It was a thing that happened in my house. And I don't know that many women who are that dishwasher oriented. Maybe it was a real guy thing.
It's just wonderful. I think we've got time to ask Jenny one more question. What would you like to ask her? All right.
I know what we can ask.
Okay, good.
Can you talk about what it was like working with Jonathan?
Sure, but it's not about the words. It's about a feeling. I don't know anybody that generous. You're pretty generous, Michael. And it seems like everybody in that theater right now is pretty generous for being here and listening and being open. But there was a different level of kindness. I didn't know what I was doing. And goodness, it is emotional. And he was willing to extend his imagination to me. I was a kid. And Jonathan Demme's imagination, that's a big fucking deal. And I can't think of another person except for my family who has been that generous with their imagination. So it was like, there is something Willy Wonka about it because he creates such a world around himself. But it wasn't removed in that Wonka way. he was right fucking there and completely present, and he invited you into his imagination, and you always just, it was like that. And I guess that's the only way to talk about it for me. I learned a lot of movie stuff, but that's what it was really like.
Jenny, can you let people in on some of the exciting things you're doing now?
I sort of can, but because it's in television, they make you sign all these, all these things that you're not allowed to say anything. But not many people know that I'm a big, I'm like a Trekkie. I'm like a big Trek person. So I'm an EP on Star Trek Discovery and the new one with Patrick Stewart, which I'm really not allowed to talk about, but it's really fun. And I'm also doing the series of, I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you, the series of Man Who Fell to Earth, based on the movie, which just got picked up. So I'm really busy, which is wonderful, but I keep thinking about something that Jonathan said, which is when in doubt, just go to the truth. Because you're not going to remember all the stuff you made up anyway. Just when in doubt, go to the truth. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right.
Well, Jenny, let me just say one thing. It's something Jonathan used to say about your screenplay over and over again. Mm-hmm. We all need to thank you for your gift. You have a real gift.
Absolutely.
Michael, you just made me cry. So thank you. But thank you, Michael, because
Thank you so much.
I can't even, I'm all emotional right now. Just everybody who's there, champagne, if I was there, I would buy you guys a drink, like all of you. Thank you so much for this experience.
I also don't know whether it was in the script, Jenny, or not, Olive, whether Olive was cast, but the poodle was Jonathan's poodle.
Olive was the reason that I got that gig. Olive the poodle was the reason that Jonathan Demme agreed to make that movie. You guys don't know, Michael, you know this story.
Good to know.
No, I'm serious.
Well, Olive was a much-loved dog that came in to the editing room every day with Jonathan and came to the film center every time he was there. He loved her very dearly. And there's a line in the film that I don't know whether it was in the script because it was the one moment where there was some improvisation, but to me it sums up your vision in the screenplay and Jonathan's vision of life, which was when Haris says, here we are all together as one. This is the way it is in heaven.
Absolutely.
Oh, that wasn't me. That was Jonathan, 100%.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you, Jenny.
Thank you, Stephen.
Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Thank you.